Welcome everyone to our event today, Pluralistic Counselling and Psychotherapy, our interview with Mick Cooper. A warm welcome to you, Mick.
Thanks, John. Nice to see you again.
Well, thanks for joining us again on our interview schedule. We really appreciate it. And thanks also to everyone who's joining us online tonight. We know there's people from all over the country and hopefully from further afield tuning in to listen to the interview. Some people are already using the chat room, so if
Great.
you can, pop your questions into Mick.
Yeah.
Hope it's going to be...
Can I say something about that, John, actually,
Yes,
just quickly?
please.
I mean, one of the things I wanted to say is that a lot of the work that we're doing around pluralistic counselling is really about trying to ask questions and kind of generate debate. So, I mean, if people have got questions and things and criticism, challenges, it's great to discuss it, because that's really what the whole thing we're trying to do is about.
Sounds great, Mick. So it sounds like you're up for the tricky questions as well.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, a little bit of controversy.
As long as they're not from my kids. I have to say hi to my kids, Maya, Ruby, Sheila and Izzy. And, but no questions from them. They'll probably be very, very rude.
Okay, well, I'm glad you've remembered to say hello to the kids.
Yeah, remember, yeah.
Yeah, good stuff, good stuff. So, yeah, give them a wave. Hello, kids. Well, I mean, the kids will know where you are, I guess, but for everybody else, can you just give us a sense of where you're located today?
Yeah, I'm sitting in my office in Glasgow, west end of Glasgow, University of Strathclyde.
Great, yeah. I was just saying how wise and literary you look with all those books behind you.
And I was just saying I bought it from IKEA, a special facade of intellectual counselling books.
Yes, they're all cardboard cutouts behind you.
They're all cardboard cutouts.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know you've joined us before to talk about relational depth, but tonight you're here to talk about the book that you've co-authored with John McLeod,
Yeah.
Pluralistic Counselling and Psychotherapy. I'd like to start off by asking you, Mick, why did you write the book?
Well, it evolved over a number of years, and it was something that, I mean, I think comes out of the relational depth work, certainly comes out of person-centered and humanistic work. I think what happened is that about 2005 or 2006, when still very involved in the person-centered work, and John and I went on actually a train journey. We were going down to Sheffield to meet Emmy van Derzen. And I don't know quite what happened. I don't know whether I'd had a run-in with some colleagues about person-centeredness, but I think we got into talking about the kind of what we, just feeling that although we both loved the person-centered approach and felt very passionate about it, I think we both felt that there was something a bit rigid and a bit stuck about it. And that there was some really fundamental contradiction between an approach that was kind of about openness and kind of embracing and expansiveness and being kind of really going with whatever and growing at a kind of therapeutic level. But I think, I mean, I got really, I do get very frustrated with what I see, some of the closed-mindedness in the field. Like the way people think about CBT, for instance. And I know myself, I'm not talking about other people, I'm also talking about myself. The way we kind of categorize and stereotype and, kind of demonize CBT or other approaches. And I think that was also true for my, existential, training in the existential approach. And it was very similar, everything was about being open and a kind of openness to the world. But then any interventions which didn't fit into this very specific existential mold, I mean, you really had had a terrible time on my training, to do anything different. So I think, we got kind of talking about that, and John was setting up a research clinic at his University of Abertay at the time. And I think we were thinking about, how can we develop a way of practicing and thinking about therapy that is really embodying the kind of values that we really believe in, which is about openness, which is about really trying to be willing to be challenged and really trying to be kind of fluid and flexible. And also about, in terms of the specifics of the client work, really trying to be able to respond to the individual client that we're working with at a particular point in time. And because one of the things I think is in both person-centered and the existential approaches is that there's so much emphasis on the individuality of the client. Not knowing, that Spinelli, Ernesto Spinelli, who was one of my teachers and is somebody that whose work I probably see as more of a mentor than anybody else. You know, he talks about unknowing. He wrote a book called Tales of the Unknowing, and about the importance of really encountering clients from a position of unknowing. And you know, for me, I think in an ethical, in terms of values, that's so important. But then if you're doing that on one hand, and then on the other hand, you're saying, but here are 6 necessary and sufficient conditions for therapeutic personality change across all clients at all points in time, doesn't really make sense, actually. I mean, I think, you know, being open, if you're holding a position of unknowing, you actually have to say, well, I don't know what is going to help this client to change. I don't, you know, I've got assumptions. Of course, I've got assumptions, I've got beliefs, but I can't know a priori that these are the 6 things that are really going to make the difference to that client. So it was really, I think where it came from was really trying to develop a way of thinking about therapy that could take forward some of those concerns and the values and the interests. And then, you know, so John set up his research clinic, and we, you know, practiced that, and he started developing counselling, and he developed a more pluralistic course. And then I was involved in the course, the Counselling Psychology course with Glasgow Caledonian University. And there we developed a kind of pluralistic basis for a person-centred and a CBT course, which seems to work pretty well, and the students seem to, you know, engage well with it. So, and then in the last couple of years, we produced a book on pluralistic counselling and psychotherapy. And but also, you know, I mean, it's been a real process of change. I mean, some of the things that we wrote in that book now, I kind of look back on and think, well, I wish we'd worded that differently. And I think things that I've just written, we've got a Journal of Psychotherapy and Counselling coming out, or a special issue on pluralistic therapy. And, you know, we're kind of developing it and growing it and inviting people to get involved in what we're kind of thinking about.
Yeah, so it sounds like the book is not the last word on this. It's
no,
a kind of
God, no. I mean,
yeah.
That's a really important point, John. And I think that, I mean, the book was quite heavily criticised. You know, we wrote an article in Therapy Today, and we got quite critical responses, which kind of hurt, and is also interesting and kind of, you know, initially it was like, but then after a while, I think, you know, we could see what some of the challenges are around. But absolutely, I mean, it would be terrible to think that what we tried to do is the last word. I mean, as I was saying before, I think increasingly what I'd like to say is that I think it's about an agenda. It's a set of questions. It's a set of, you know, it's trying to think about, you know, for me, the core question is, how can I be a therapist in a person-centered way? Okay, so not how can I be a person-centered therapist, but how can I be a therapist, and how can I engage with a professional community in a person-centered way? So, for instance, how can I really genuinely empathise and prize people who offer different forms of therapy? You know, how can I prize people who offer CBT therapy, or people who offer psychodynamic therapy? I mean, for me, you know, there's something I've always kind of reacted against psychodynamic therapy. Maybe, you know, I didn't enjoy it much when I went into it as a kid, and so it's a real challenge. But I think that's the kind of challenge for me. Being person-centered is about being open to that challenge, and being able to, you know, really value and hold these other approaches in a person-centered way.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting about how there's a conversation between, I guess, the different approaches, and a way that's more valuing and prizing.
Yeah, I mean, the way that I've kind of, I mean, I didn't write this in the book so much, but the way